Emma, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining. Emma, let's get right into it. There's never a dull moment in City Hall and or the state. This new year has it's been well, it's for a while now. It seems like there's always a lot for you to do and write about and cover. Let's start first with the announcement on Monday on crime, and the reason why I want to start there is simply because the Democratic primary is 6 months away, and Mayor Adams ran on crime, 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 and reducing crime and safety and public safety and quality of life. Question to you is based on the numbers, there was some progress made, but there was another part of the announcement where violent crime has gone up. What do you make of it in terms of the messaging? Because a lot of his prospects and a lot of his messaging come election is going to be based on public safety. What did you make of the announcement, and what did you think of the numbers?
Yeah, I mean, he said that felony assaults were up, and that has been a stubborn problem, and it's a problem for the mayor because those types of violent crimes, make the tabloids and scare people on their commute to work. And so even though murders have gone down, those felony assaults are up, and so are sexual assaults. And those are things that New Yorkers worry about. And he is going to run for reelection on the issue of public safety as a former police officer. And I think, when he entered office, we were coming out of the pandemic. And in some ways, the city, has gotten safer, but these high profile crimes, like the woman who was set on fire on the subway, are really difficult for the mayor and the governor to say that they're doing enough to address public safety. And tomorrow is the mayor's State of the City speech. And it seems like he's going to focus on two themes, public safety and affordability. And so he has, a few months to really try to sell a message that he's improving those things. And it's going to be difficult to do if crimes like these keep happening.
Emma, but a lot of the folks that have announced, people that have announced that they're running, a lot of them come from the defund movement, the left. Um, you think that the mayor sort of wins the day based on his background on the issue of public safety, or do you think there's room for the folks that are considering a run or running and officially announced to own the subject matter?
Well, I was at the mayor's news conference yesterday on Tuesday, and he had sort of a funny quote where he said, "I've got 99 problems." He kept saying, "I've got 99 problems," and it was in response to a question about the MTA's finances. He's like, "That's a governor problem, not a me problem." But the mayor has a lot of problems as he's running for reelection, including the fact that prosecutors said that they may have uncovered additional criminal conduct. But I think, the field is still unsettled. We don't know if Andrew Cuomo is entering the race, but I think that the candidates on the left are formulating their own messages on public safety. When I spoke with Brad Lander when he entered the race, he talked about professionalizing the police department and addressing, public safety with different measures that he says are proven with research. And it's hard for the mayor to argue that he's on top of the crime issue when the police department has been in turmoil, when he's had multiple police commissioners, when Madry just stepped down, and I think Jessica Tisch, the new police commissioner, can help him deliver the message that he's trying to deliver, and can show that he's turning a page with new police leadership. But I think the candidates on the left say that the mayor's management of the police department is also a vulnerability for him because there's been so much scandal.
Emma, what's your over under on former Governor Cuomo running?
Oh my gosh. I mean, my opinion changes almost on a weekly basis. I think there's still a good chance that he enters the race in February or March. I think he would have preferred to do it if the mayor wasn't running for reelection. But I think there is a path for him, and there's rumors that he would prefer City Hall to Albany. There was a story in New York Magazine that quoted some of his, advisors on the record. I think I'd probably place it at 50-50 right now. 50% chance he enters the race, 50% chance he doesn't. And then, there's been rumors about other candidates. We did a story about Tish James entering the race. I think she probably will not enter the race. We've heard rumors about Dan Goldman. His spokeswoman said he's not entering the race. So there's still some, Chris Quinn, the former city council speaker, could enter the race still. There's still some candidates who are sort of looking at the race. And at the same time, I do think the candidates who are in the race, several are going to qualify for public funds soon. And the race is going to heat up. They're going to be unveiling proposals on street homelessness, on housing, on public safety. They're going to be holding more campaign style events. We're going to be getting more campaign forums. I think that the race is going to heat up now that the presidential race is over, and now that the holidays are over. I do think the race is going to get a lot hotter.
Emma, there's only two people that I've seen or heard the mayor respond to in terms of candidates. One is Brad Lander, and two is former Governor Cuomo. What is that? Now, I'm from the school of thought that if you don't mention someone, just my opinion, they're not relevant, right? So the fact that he took the time that he takes time, well, not so much with Controller Lander, but recently with former Governor Cuomo. Do you think that that's a hint that maybe he's heard or someone's heard that Governor Cuomo's in?
Yeah, I think he wants to
Or that he
signal to
thinks he's
Cuomo.
formidable, or that, I'm sorry to talk over you, or that he
Yeah,
thinks he's formidable, or he's the person that could give him a run for his money?
I think the mayor wants to signal to Cuomo that if he does enter the race, he's going to make it very unpleasant for him. That he's going to fight back, that he's going to say, why are you trying to kick out the second black mayor? That he's going to say, what did you do on bail reform? I think he's signaling to the governor that if he enters the race, Adams is a fighter. He's a political fighter, and he's going to push back forcefully. And so that's something Cuomo has to consider. And, I think the mayor has often criticized Brad Lander. I think he's comfortable sort of showing their differences. He mocked him once in his voice. But I think Lander, he's a citywide elected official. He's raised the most money. He keeps raising money. He has a fundraiser this week. Um, and he is sort of the most prominent candidate in the field. And so the mayor is preparing his attacks on Lander as well. And, the mayor has sort of dismissed the other candidates. He didn't go to the first campaign forum. He said, oh, these people are in their pajamas till noon or something, which is a little puzzling because these are hardworking, state officials, state lawmakers. Yeah, but you're right that I haven't heard him address Zellner Myrie straight on. And it's interesting because they come from sort of the same place in the political world, from central Brooklyn. And, Myrie replaced an Adams ally when he took that seat in the state Senate. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think people say that Zellner Myrie has sort of the most potential of any candidate if he can gain momentum and get attention. And he has sort of the biggest upside if he can run an effective campaign, because he could get potentially progressive voters and black voters in Brooklyn. And so the mayor hasn't addressed him, but I'm sure if Zellner Myrie, surges in the polls, the mayor will be hitting him directly as well.
Emma, what do you think as someone who, and please, if you can't respond, it's fine. What do you personally think of? I am, I understood the power and the sort of validity that one got from a New York Times endorsement. And the paper has now decided they're not going to endorse. Why they would give that up is baffling to me. What do you think about that?
I can't express an opinion about the opinion side decision, but I will say what I've been saying to sources, which is that the Metro desk on the news side of the New York Times is going to devote a lot of resources to covering this race. I covered the 2021 race, and Jeff Mays and Dana Rubenstein and I covered that race with some of our colleagues, and we did a whole video project where we interviewed the top 8 candidates. I mean, we did We really cover that race closely, and we're going to cover this race just as closely. My colleague Maya King joined our team after covering the presidential race. She's going to be joining the team to help cover the race. So we're making those plans now, and we're going to be covering it very closely. And you know, we're committed to covering the city, and the three of us cover City Hall together. And so there's going to be plenty of coverage from the New York Times, and that's a huge part of our mission.
Emma, the affordability thing from both the mayor and now the governor, pocketbook issues. The Times wrote an interesting piece on post Trump, everyone's leaning more towards the economy. The economy, the economy. The old Bill Clinton line is the economy stupid, right?
Hmm.
Do you think, in terms of the noise around congestion pricing, that it's going to be hard for Governor Hochul to get that messaging out on bread and butter issues when there's all this noise around? I now have to pay this toll. I don't think my money's going to go to fixing the MTA. What are your thoughts of on what that means ultimately? Because in this case, it doesn't seem, and I've been wrong before, that good policy is good politics for regardless of what side you're on. This has proven to be an unpopular issue. And what are your thoughts on what this means when the messaging has been bread and butter, pocketbook issues, and making life easier and or more affordable for New Yorkers?
I used to cover transit. I was a transit reporter before I was City Hall bureau chief. So I've been covering congestion pricing for about a decade. And the transit advocates will say that, yes, it may be deeply unpopular right now in the polls, but once people see the benefits of congestion pricing, like they have in other cities like London and Stockholm, they will see that if there's less traffic, the money being poured into the system is making service better. That once they see some of the benefits of congestion pricing, the popularity may rise. But yes, right now the polling is difficult, and I was just sort of surprised, on Sunday when it took effect. The governor wasn't out talking about it. The mayor didn't mention it. He was tweeting about the snow and all these other things and didn't say anything about congestion pricing. So I think both of them are sort of letting the MTA chair, Jano Lieber, like take on the public face of this because it is difficult in terms of its popularity. I mean, I asked the mayor yesterday why he wasn't out talking about congestion pricing or didn't even tweet an educational campaign. And he said that he wasn't worried about the polling, but that he didn't want to bigfoot the state because the MTA is really a state issue. But I think it is, I mean, Andrew Cuomo is against congestion pricing, even though he was the one who signed it into law. It's hard for elected officials to sort of take that hit right now, but I think that there could, it could improve in popularity over time. And the thing that trans advocates will say is most of the people who are driving into the core of Manhattan are, let's say, wealthy business people from New Jersey, and they can afford the toll. Like most working class people aren't driving into the congestion zone. I was thinking about myself, we got a car during the pandemic when I had my second kid, which was a bit controversial. Streets blog raked me over the coals for that decision. But I can't remember the last time I drove into the congestion zone. I live in Upper Manhattan and I have a car and I just don't go down there because the traffic is terrible. And I can take the A train. And, I might drive to New Jersey to visit my parents, but I'm not going to go into that congestion zone unless I have a really good reason to do so.
Emma, what do you think of the governor's hand going into this legislative session? Recidivism, public safety, involuntary commitment for folks that suffer from, or people that suffer from mental health. These are issues that are on the minds of a lot of New Yorkers. Do you think she goes into a this session with a strong hand? She got things on bail. She got something on retail theft. Um, eh, Carl and Andrea and Speaker Hasty better said, and Senate Majority Leader Stuart Cousins. Where do you think her hand is going into the session in negotiations with the two leaders of both the Assembly and the Senate?
I mean, I think Hochul is in a difficult position right now. She's worried about reelection. She understands she has to address both safety and affordability. I view it through the lens of covering the mayor. Like both of them are in a difficult position, and I think that's why they're working together. And they both realize that they have to show some results on this issue, whether it's tax credits, whether it's, issues like committing people who have mental health challenges. I think, but I think it's going to be a difficult session because these are thorny issues, and I don't think that the state lawmakers are necessarily going to go along with some of her ideas. So it'll be tense as it always is. But I'm interested in looking at sort of what the mayor gets out of Albany. He's listed some of his priorities. But it's a really critical session for the mayor, with the primary in June.
What do you make of Congressmember Richie Torres and Congressmember Mike Lawler and now Lieutenant Governor Delgado flirting with the potential that they may run for governor?
I've been sort of surprised at just how brutal some of Richie Torres's attacks have been. Like he's really out there just hammering away at the governor. And it's been interesting to see his transformation. I know him more from like the city council and in the 2021 race, you may remember he endorsed Andrew Yang, a decision I think he probably came to regret. And it was interesting to think that he might run for mayor. He seems more focused on the governor. But it's been interesting just to see how vicious he's been with the governor. And I think that's because he views her as politically weak. And I've heard, that being in Congress in the minority party isn't that fun of a job. And so he's looking for other opportunities.
Do you think there's a possibility that President Trump or incoming President Trump rolls back congestion pricing?
It's difficult to know. I mean, it could end up in the courts. There's been so many lawsuits and legal challenges. And at the same time, President Trump could, make threats to the city and say, if you don't undo this, I'm going to withhold XYZ funding. So he could try to make, life harder for elected officials here. But it's been interesting to see Joe Borelli, the Republican leader in the city council, hammering away at congestion pricing and making this a central issue. And so, whoever also runs for in the Republican primary for mayor, we know Curtis Lee was running. We're not sure who else might enter the race. Those people will certainly make congestion pricing an issue, and I think Republicans view it as an area where they can gain ground in the city.
Emma, do you think the average voter or the average New Yorker cares ultimately? Let's say, the potholes are being fixed, the crime in the subway or perceived crime in the subway is being addressed. Do you think the average voter cares if Mayor Adams is cozying up to Trump at the end of the day? Or do you think that's a problematic thing for someone who's running to gain the Democratic nomination and or for a second term?
It seems like the mayor is really walking a tightrope on this. Al Sharpton said this week that if he was too cozy with Trump, that could backfire with black voters, and that was sort of viewed as a warning to the mayor. And I think Democrats are worried about him being too close with Trump. But at the same time, the idea of a pardon and his criminal prosecution are in the air. And it's been interesting to see, like the mayor, not totally close the door to returning to the Republican Party. It's been interesting to see him praise Elon Musk. And, people will ask me, like, do you think he's going to become a Republican, before Trump's inauguration? Someone asked me that over the holidays. And I said, no, I think he's going to remain a Democrat and run in the Democratic primary for mayor. But he's walking this tightrope between, like, being friendly to Trump, saying that he's going to work with Trump, and then at the same time not alienating black voters and other voters in the Democratic primary who, who might be worried about being too close with Trump. And this is all really going to come to a head if there are mass deportations. Once we see what Trump does on immigration, the mayor will face a difficult choice of is he going to go along with those deportations? Is he going to encourage Trump just to focus on violent offenders, which is what he said? But he's going to face, I think, a lot of difficult choices once Trump begins to enact his agenda.
Emma, let's wrap this up. Give me your biggest winner for 2024 at the city and state level.
Oh boy. Um, I mean, I'll dodge the question a bit and say room nine. It was quite a year for room nine. We were
Yeah,
very
that's fine. That's
busy,
fine.
and I mean, it was a good year for journalists who cover Eric Adams and the city council because you know, there was the indictment and there was, a lot coming out of the city council with the broker fee bill and City of Yes. And, there were so many resignations in the Adams administration. There was just like a buffet of news to cover. So we all needed like a nap, I think, over the holidays, and now we're caffeinating and getting ready to cover this mayor's race. I started on the beat, right as the 2021 mayoral race was heating up, and one of my colleagues said, it's like covering a presidential race, except everything is a taxi ride away. And they were like, this is going to be one of the most fun things you'll ever cover as a journalist. So the 2021 race was really interesting and really close. I mean, the statistic I always cite to people when they ask me about the mayor and his reelection bid is, he won the primary in 2021 by only 8,000 votes. So he doesn't have a lot of wiggle room here, right? Like if he won 4 years ago by only 8,000 votes, that wasn't a huge mandate. And so he has to hold on to those votes that he got, and he can't lose too many. And so I think this race is going to be super interesting to cover. It's going to be another great year to be in room nine, covering this mayoral race and the trial in April. Um, but I guess there weren't that many political winners last year. It was a tough year for Adams. It was a tough year for Hochul. I guess some might say Adrienne Adams was a winner of last year because she has sort of found her footing as speaker and has stood up to the mayor on certain issues and sort of made her mark on issues. Whether you agree with her or not on those issues, I think that she's been a pretty strong city council speaker, and has gotten some of her priorities, across the finish line.
Biggest loser.
I mean, it was a hard year for Eric Adams, the first sitting mayor to be charged criminally. And I think losing Ingrid Lewis Martin, one of his longest serving aides, and so many people, like on a personal level, he talks about his mother, thinking about his mother who died in 2021 and how she would tell him to fight on. It's been a series of setbacks, and he seems determined to fight on, but I think there's been like a lot of personal loss. And his dream was to be mayor, and the idea that he might not win re-election, I think, is, probably personally crushing for him. So it was a hard year. He's trying to turn things around. But he from when I first started covering him, he talked about David Dinkins, and he said, he was denied a second term, and that he wasn't going to let that happen to Adams himself. So I think he would even acknowledge that 2024 was a really hard year.
Emma, give me three predictions for 2025.
I'm a news reporter, not an opinion reporter, so I have to
Come on,
continue to stick
Emma.
with the facts. I mean, I just think the mayoral race is going to be really interesting. I think the trial will be really interesting. I've been talking to folks about that, and there could be some interesting witnesses, at the trial, and that's going to dominate the headlines in those final weeks before the primary. So that's a huge risk for the mayor. So, we'll be covering the trial, we'll be covering the primary. The debates are always a lot of fun too. I remember the debates from 2021 when Yang and Adams were whacking each other. And so, I'm just focused on planning my whole year around that June primary. And so that's what I'm really focused on. But And then the third big story, I mean, the trial, the primary, and then, what Trump's presidency means for the city. Those would be like the three big stories that I'll be watching this year.
I'm going to ask you a personal question as a parent. How problematic is the pre-K early learn situation for Mayor Adams? Talk about
So I,
pocketbook issues.
Yeah, I think that's when people talk about the mayor's vulnerabilities, there's certainly the criminal charges, but there's also the budget cuts and, the decision to close libraries and the rollback in some ways of 3K. I have a 4-year-old, he's in pre-K. He was in free 3K and free pre-K, and that was life-changing for our family's finances to have free preschool. And the director of my kid's school actually pulled me aside yesterday at drop-off. She knows I'm a journalist, and she was like, no one's returning my phone calls at the Department of Education, and we haven't gotten our budget approved, and there's a lot of concerns about how the program's being run and whether it's properly staffed. And it was a policy that was very popular in a lot of neighborhoods in New York City, free pre-K and free 3K. And so I do think that's a vulnerability for the mayor. But some of the folks who are such fans of that, maybe they wouldn't have voted for the mayor. Maybe they voted for Maya Wiley or Catherine Garcia to begin with. Um, but it was like arguably the biggest achievement of Bill de Blasio. And many voters are disappointed that Eric Adams hasn't had the same commitment to the program.
I want to thank you for your time, and I want to wrap this up. Anything you want to add, or anything I forgot to mention that you want to talk about before we wrap?
No, just thanks for having me.
Okay, last two questions, and then that's it, and then you're free. Best day on the job,
Oh my gosh. Best day on the job in 2024 or ever?
ever, ever. When you
Um,
broke a story.
oh gosh.
And
Um, this is so hard. I'm sorry. Um, I should have thought of this before. I mean, I think like an election day is always a lot of fun. Um, so covering the primary in 2021 was really interesting. And it was suspenseful, as you may recall, because it was the first time with ranked choice voting, and we didn't know for sure if Adams had won. He had a lead in the first round of votes. And so that was really interesting. And then covering, the mayor's inauguration in 2022. He was inaugurated, he took the oath of office on New Year's Eve in Times Square. And I did a piece last week about comparing the entourage he had on stage that night. It was Ingrid, Lewis Martin, and Timothy Pearson, and many of his longtime allies who are all, gone from city government now or who are under investigation. So it's sort of interesting to look at the people who are on stage with him. And I think in that moment, there was a lot of hope. um, there were a lot of people who had positive feelings towards Eric Adams and who thought maybe he was the right person to bring the city out of the pandemic. And, even you'll talk to advisors of his and said that he faced this sort of choice when he entered office, whether to bring on many of his longtime friends or whether to bring on, experienced bureaucrats. And that was a real turning point, that when he came into City Hall, was he going to be more transparent? Was he going to hire experienced professionals and not friends of his? Was he going to try to, um, you know, address, I guess, some of the concerns about his leadership style? And we've seen what has happened since then. And at the same time, you know, there's been some reporting recently about whether the mayor has a path to reelection and whether he'll use the bully pulpit. He's a good campaigner. He has a lot of charisma. Yesterday he was cracking jokes. And so he is a strong campaigner. And as the Politico piece reported, there is a path to victory for him, even if it's narrow now. So I'd say covering the primary and his inauguration were two really memorable days.
worst day.
Worst day. Um, I mean, I'm thinking of like when I was on the transit, there'd be like a fatal train crash where five people died. Those are like the worst days as a journalist. Some of the longest days are the budget days where we have to pour through the budget documents, and do these technical briefings and sort of figure out what is the news there. Those are long days. Um, and I mean, the day of the indictment was a hard day. You know, um, I talked to a lot of people who were like, I can't believe the mayor of New York City is being criminally indicted, and this is a sad day for the city. And it was a sad day for the mayor personally, who I've covered for years. Um, so yeah, there's lots of hard days, and covering some of these acts of violence in the city, those are hard days too.
Emma, thank you so much for your time. And I know we went a little over, but hopefully this won't be the last time. And Happy New Year to you and your family, and continued success to you.
Happy New Year. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, bye.